Can I get here? Welcome everybody to another edition of Grassroots Motorsports Live presented by CRC Industries. Folks, I am JG Pasterjack. You are here tonight on a fun night. We're back out in the shop. I'm very excited. We have not been out here getting our hands dirty for the last couple weeks. Before we start the show, if I could ask you for a huge favor, reach into your pocket, look right in front of you and reach to the keyboard that you are working at right now. Go down to the bottom of the video, give us a like, give us a share, give us both of those things. If you're watching us on YouTube, welcome aboard tonight to all of our YouTube fans. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and we would definitely appreciate that as well. All right, enough begging. I start to look pathetic after a while. Let's take a look. See, and Carl has already shared it. Our buddy Dinesh is here. Who else is here? Andrew is here. Our buddy Charlie is watching. We got a great crowd tonight, and here's what is going on. We're going to do an alignment, or show you how to do an alignment on our C5Z06. But the techniques that we use and some of the stuff that we built, we think we can, are going to apply to anybody. These are sort of universal techniques. We're going to show you how to build what we call a string alignment setup. And a lot of you guys have these out there, you guys and girls that work on your own race cars, set up your own race cars. We've seen a lot of folks that actually have home-built setups out there, so don't be shy. Throw them down in the chat in Facebook. We'd love to see what you've done, because our rig here is still very much a work in progress. We'll show you some of the methodology we went through to create what we have, but we're still sort of figuring some stuff out here. So we'd love to see what you are working with out there as well. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention that made this show possible. If you look right down here, you will see our friends at CRC Industries. You will also see our friends at Autobooks Aerobooks. You can reach them at autobooks-aerobooks.com on the internet. CRC makes a full line of automotive and household chemicals, lubricants, and cleaning sprays like carbon and of course brake clean that everybody knows. Also a lot of cool stuff like Wasp and Hornet Killer and the cleaners we use to clean all of our screens, all of our lenses before the show. They have some great electronics cleaners if you go deep into their catalog. It's really, really cool stuff. Autobooks Aerobooks, the greatest bookstore in the world, located right there in Burbank, California. Of course, all their stuff is available on the internet at autobooks-aerobooks.com. Check them out if you're a reader or want to order a cool DVD or a model or anything, baby. They got tens of thousands of stuff, the things there in stock. Cool book we're going to be showing you later. All right, let's get to work. So before we start, let me get over to my pad here. Derek says I'm his hero. Derek, you need to set your hero bar a little bit higher, my friend. Thank you, though. Thank you very much. Mark wants to know what were our alignment specs. We're actually going to be discovering that throughout the evening. I kind of know them, but I've forgotten them. Our toe is basically all straight ahead at this point, and I forget where the camber is. But we'll show you how to determine that, and we'll determine that on this car as well. All right. So before we get started, let's have a little chat here about what we're talking about when we're actually talking about doing an alignment. We're talking about three basic concepts: camber, castor, and toe. Now, so let's start with toe, which is sort of the most basic of these concepts. Okay, toe. So what is toe? Toe is the relative direction of your wheels in regards to the center line of the vehicle, which should be also your intended direction of travel. So if this is your car viewed from above, and these are your wheels viewed from above. This is a cam car, so they're really wide. If you draw an imaginary center line through both of these, that is what you use to determine your toe. Look, I know this is review for a lot of folks out there, but it might not be for some, and I'm not the brightest guy in the world, so this is a refresher for me too. So if your wheels are closer in the front than they are in the back, that is a condition known as toe in. What does toe in do for you? So if your wheels are essentially pigeon-toed, if the fronts of your tires are pointing at each other, and we're talking about degrees here and 30 seconds and 16ths of an inch. We're not talking about massive amounts, but what conditions do this lead to? Well, toe in is generally a condition that creates a little more straight line stability. Each side of the car wants to push itself towards the center line, towards the center line of travel during motion of the car. So it creates some just inherent directional stability. With a toe out condition where we have the front of our wheels, if this is our direction of travel, further apart than the backs of our wheels, that would be a toe out condition. You would be pointing out with both those front tires like that. So that's something we generally can associate with cars that feel a little bit nervous. They tend to turn in, the car tends to turn in really, really well when you have a little bit of toe out, because that inside tire is already pointing in towards the corner. It doesn't have to move so far to start building up slip angle and actually building up cornering force, so you get very, very nice turn in. The trade-off for that comes in directional stability. Of course, if you've got both cars pointing away from the center, or both tires pointing away from the center line that your direction of travel is defined by, they both want to kind of wander off and do their own thing, especially on roads that have a little bit of unevenness or bumps or whatever. So a little bit of toe out can cause a little bit of instability. Sometimes that stability is necessary. For example, you're going to tend to set up an autocross car a little more aggressively with toe out than you are a road race car. For a car that's on track, you want a little more stability. You don't necessarily need crisp, super fast turning. You don't need those slip angles to build quite so fast because you're in corners for longer periods of time. Doing a lot of unnatural stuff in an autocross, you want those slip angles to just sort of boom. Ed? Hey Ed, can you? Yeah, see. So you want those slip angles to, yeah, everybody's doing it now except me. So you want those slip angles to build very, very quickly in an autocross. You want that weight transfer to be instant. So you might tend to run a little bit more toe out on an autocross car than you will a track car or a road race car. You also might tend to run a little bit of additional toe out in a front wheel drive car than you would in a rear wheel drive car, because the tendency of those front tires that are also providing thrust to want to pull themselves forward is also going to create, it's going to pivot those control arms around those around their inner pivots, create a dynamic toe-in situation. So you might want to start with some static toe out in a front wheel drive car to alleviate a dynamic toe-in situation. So let's see if I got most of that right. So yeah, Todd is actually building his own alignment rack right now. Hopefully we can learn something from each other tonight, Todd. Okay, so that is a quick descriptor of toe. Now, modern cars, a lot of modern cars with an independent rear suspension, you're also looking at adjusting toe in the rear. Very similar situation. Toe in the rear is going to create stability for the rear. Toe out in the rear going to create a lot of instability in the rear, especially because whatever your toe out in the rear is, you can't change it by changing the steering angle. So you can't really adjust for it dynamically. So typically you're going to stay away from toe out in the rear. In most cars that we found, if you're going to toe out in the rear, you are covering for some other problem that should be fixed some other way. There might be situations where you're talking about a front-wheel drive autocross car that you just can't get to turn any other way. But in general, if you're using toe out in the rear of most anything, you might want to look elsewhere to solve whatever problem it is you're trying to solve, because you're creating another problem to solve a previous problem. Okay, so let's next look at camber. And I have horrible handwriting, but thank you for sticking along with us. Camber is very simple. Camber is your car when viewed from the front or rear. If this is your car. There's you. We're going to give you kind of a spiky 90s do and some cool sunglasses. Here, how about just one? We're going to black out your eyes like you're in a porno movie. There you go. Okay, so camber is basically the angle of your wheels and tires when viewed from in front or behind. In general, what we're talking about in the world of high performance is we're talking about negative camber. We're talking about the tops of those tires being closer together than the bottoms of those tires. So what does that do for us? Well, simply put, when your car goes into a corner, it's going to roll one way or the other. It's going to roll towards the outside of the corner. As this car rolls, that wheel being attached to the car is going to want to roll with it. If you have some static negative camber built in to your alignment as the car rolls, the tire will go from a situation where it is leaning inward to a point where it is hopefully straight up and putting all of its contact patch on the ground during the dynamic portion of your corner. So you're compensating a bit for the roll of the car and also for the dynamic weight transfer of the car moving from one side to the other. The ideal situation is to have your max G outside tires be straight up and down, or at least have the contact patch as flat as possible. For most tires, that means still having a tiny little bit of dynamic negative camber, but that's a whole other show. So for now, let's just say static negative camber is used primarily to compensate for body roll and be able to put those tires flat on the ground during a corner. All right, so that is camber. Now we move on to Castor, which is probably the sort of most complex of these adjustments, because it sort of it affects other adjustments and it affects other things dynamically. Castor is basically, if we're talking about looking at your car from the side, here's your wheel. Did you know there's like this whole subculture of people that do these contests where they draw a 1 meter circle freehand, and like it's a thing. Like there's like, yeah, so people go to like, I don't know if it's like to the death or they gamble on it, but it's like people drawing 1 meter circles, and you can easily get lost in these YouTube rabbit holes of watching nerds draw 1 meter circles perfectly over and over. And I like, they're wearing, bandanas, and like they got like smoking cigarettes, and they're really just wired from, chewing like that cot stuff that they do. I don't know what's going on, but and anyway, if this is your wheel as viewed from the side, you've got, we're talking about Castor, we're talking about your steering wheels primarily. Boy, my handwriting is not getting any better as we go along. So let's look at like a strut car, because it's the easiest to draw. If this is our strut coming down, bottom of your strut would be an upright and a hub, and this is the center of your wheel. So when you turn, this strut's going to rotate around a point. If we draw a line through the axis that's rotating on, down to the ground, and then draw a completely vertical line down to the ground, the angle, the difference between these two lines is your Castor amount. So what does Castor do for us? Well, glad you asked. Castor creates some dynamic force. Actually, we have a demonstration we can show you here. Let me get, yeah, Dinesh says I have been on the dark side of YouTube again. And Andy says I look like Guy Fieri. Welcome to Flavortown. Yeah, welcome to Flavor. Flavortown has never looked so sweaty. Okay, so everybody's familiar with Castor who's ever been to a grocery store or who's ever sat in an office chair, because they've seen a wheel like this. This is just a Castor, a swiveling Castor from Harbor Freight, and we can see that it steers around this bearing here, but the center line of the wheel is back here. So this is essentially the difference between our steering axis and our the center line of our wheel. So where that steering axis hits the ground, that's going to be, since the wheel is pivoting around that point, as you move that point forward, it's going to pull the center line of the wheel in behind. It's like a boat towing a skier. If you ever seen a boat tow a skier, the boat could be here and the skier is over here. Well, as the skier moves, or as the boat moves, the skier just comes in right behind him. So if we take this wheel and just set it straight, whichever direction we move it, the wheel is going to naturally want to follow. So that is what Castor does for you, is it creates this sort of self-centering effect. It does something else very cool too. If you go back to this illustration, you see that Castor, this strut is not straight up and down the way this furniture Castor is. This strut is on an angle. So what's that going to do for us? So that's going to create a very cool dynamic effect of additional dynamic camber. So if we take this same situation and we tilt this back, so our steering axis, it's in front of the wheel, but it's also at an angle. Watch what happens when this wheel turns. It also cambers. We'll do that again. So that wheel also gains camber as it goes through that steering arm. And that's important. So what that does is when you turn into that corner, load those outside wheels, you have not only the static negative camber built into your suspension, but the more Castor you have, you also gain additional camber, especially on the outside wheel, which is typically how suspensions are designed, to gain more camber on the outside wheel than they are on the inside wheel, because that's the wheel that's going to be the most heavily loaded. You also, the additional Castor also helps you gain additional camber when you need it most, through the hardest part of that corner when your steering angles are getting the highest. So those are our sort of basic concepts when it comes to defining what we're trying to adjust when we're talking about aligning a car. So now, how do we do it? Well, the actual mechanical processes are fairly easy. In a car like the Corvette here, we're going to use shims to move the control arms around, to change our camber and change our Castor. And we're going to use our tie rods. We're going to move them in and out and twist them all around to adjust our toe. So the actual physical adjustment process is fairly easy, and you probably know what it is for your car. Measuring those adjustment processes is the tricky part, and that's where this whole ridiculous contraption comes in. Let me check and see if we have any questions. We do not. So Ed says he's going to throw a little bit of dynamic trail into his next shopping cart build. We can't wait to see that, brother. We are excited about that. All right, so what we need to do is we need to find a way to measure these settings accurately and repeatably and easily while we're also adjusting the car somewhat. So how do we do that? Well, easiest way to do that, or the most common way to do that, is to build a box around the car. You build a box that has known parallel sides and forms a perfect square around the car. You use that box as your standard to measure all of these values against. Castor and camber are a little bit different. We'll show you those. Toe is usually the tricky thing to set because you need to define some parameters before you can measure your toe. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a rig whereby we could not only measure our toe and adjust it as well. And of course, we have access to a lift. That's great. The problem is when you bring a car up on a lift, your suspension goes to full droop. Well, the geometry of your suspension is going to change throughout the full compression to full droop, and you want to basically be able to measure these alignment settings at race conditions with the car on the ground, with weight in the car, and with the car level. So we wanted to build some stands that got the car up off the ground enough that we could get under it, make these adjustments to our toe especially, as well as giving the wheels, taking the hysteresis and the stiction out of the wheels, so they could move freely and move through. As you settle the car, they could move outward to their normal resting positions. And as you adjust the toe, and as you measure stuff like Castor, which we'll show you how to do in a little bit, you can actually turn the wheels and nothing's getting all screwed up. So here is what we built. It's not glamorous. Originally I set a budget of $20, and I burned through that really quick because there's a lot of 2x6s in here. But basically, what we did was we built some cribbing to get the car up off the ground. And Chris, come on in, and I'll show you guys a close-up of what these look like. So these are actually individual pieces. It's like 4 2x6s, 2 2x4s that stack on top of each other. Dimensional lumber is 1.5 inches thick, so each of these is 3 inches thick. 4 of them stacked on top of each other is 12 inches off the ground. And I haven't actually done the math on how much these could hold, but a piece of dimensional lumber in compression is going to hold a hell of a lot of weight. And you do need to basically have, I've seen different designs. I've seen some that basically just act as cradles. If you've got a Miata, you can get away with not having these pieces in the center. We wanted a direct load path going from basically the center of this thing all the way to the ground. It's a little bit heavier, but these are going to hold a heck of a lot of weight, and we don't have to worry about our Corvette or even a heavier car crushing these things. If there's a downside, it's that they're a little bit heavy and they're a little bit clumsy, but you can all stack them up. You can stack them all up in a corner somewhere. It's not something you want to take to the track with you. It's it's a couple hundred pounds of dimensional lumber there. So Mark wants to know, how did we level the platforms at all 4 corners? I'm glad you asked, because that was the next thing I was going to deal with. When you are talking about doing a setup on these pads, you want the car to be level. Chances are your floor is not level in your shop. So how do we level these pads? Well, that's part of the reason the pads come apart. So you can basically take some line levels, which is a piece of string with a level on it. I had one that I used to level these earlier, and I broke it while I was doing my leveling. But if I were to use it, you would see me essentially stretching a string between these various platforms. You would see me gauging the level off of that string, getting all 4 of these level. You can use pieces of masonite if you need just a little bit of space. You can use pieces of plywood in between these individual pieces of cribbing to move them up, move them down. You can use you want to keep full width pieces of stuff in there. So anything from like a tiny little, a thin little piece of 16th inch Luan to a piece of 1/2 inch plywood. Basically, just create some shim stock out of flat materials. You can go all the way up to like a 3/4 inch piece of MDF or something to get these pads level, because that is a very important part of the entire process. So that's how we leveled them. Mark is basically using pieces of masonite in there mostly. I was actually very impressed with how close to level the floor was to begin with. I don't think this shop was built with a lot of drainage in mind. I think it was built more with flatness in mind. So there actually, as you come closer to the door out here, it starts to fall off a little bit. But basically, from this seam back, it is really close. I think the only real difference was, dirt and stuff on the floor. So that's kind of what we use to level stuff at all 4 corners. Next big thing you got to deal with is, how do we let these wheels move independently of the ground, or of their new ground? Because if we just set them down on these blocks, as the wheels come down onto the ground, they need to basically move out a little bit, because they're going to move up in the wheel wells. They're going to, sort of come straight back up in the wheel wells, and they're going to gain a little bit of camber as they go up. So the bottoms of those wheels are going to move out. So we need to let these wheels slip and slide around a little bit. So a professional alignment shop is going to use some what's called slip and turn plates, or turn plates with a slip plate underneath them. In fact, we got some good ones from Intercomp, I think, that we'll throw a link up to. And this is what the pros use, and that's kind of what we're trying to emulate with these. But you'll see what the pros use is several $100s, and we did not have several $100s to throw into this experiment. And maybe we'll find some used someday, but we wanted to build essentially the cheap version of those. So I found on Amazon these polyethylene cutting boards, and they're about 9/16 of an inch thick, so a little bit over half an inch thick. They're nice and hard. They're perfectly round, so you can actually put them in something and they'll turn well. We built a little framework on the outside of here just to give it a little bit of safety room in case the car starts sliding. We don't want the thing to slide off of our pads. These were about $10 a piece on Amazon. Then we needed a way to let these slip around on here and essentially move freely. And that was tougher than I thought. We got some good suggestions from our Facebook crew, but what I ended up doing was just sort of experimenting with different chemicals around the garage, different lubrication chemicals around the garage, until I finally found sort of a combination that worked pretty good. And eventually I'll probably just recreate the whole thing and do it over from scratch. But what I ended up using was I got some of these cheap vinyl tiles. They're like 68 cents each at Lowe's, and they're fairly smooth on the front, a little bit rough on the back, and used a bunch of different lubricants, grease, oil, trans fluid. I completely blanked on what the third lubricant was. And ended up finding the thing that worked the best was some hydraulic jack oil for whatever reason. It's nice and thin, flows nice between there, and you can see that slides really well. It rotates really well. You can drop your turn plate on top of there, and it creates a nice sort of slippery surface on there. So I think what we're going to do next is let me throw some fresh lubricant on those. Yeah, so Dinesh, thank you for the plug, Dinesh. Dinesh says, did you use any CRC chemicals? We actually, believe it or not, and I'm sure you will believe it, I actually went through all of my CRC lubricants. That was the first thing I did, because I really wanted a CRC thing to work well on this stuff. I tried, well here, I'll show you what I tried. I tried white lithium grease from CRC. White lithium grease works great on any metal-to-metal surface. It sticks nice. What we found though was it was a little bit thick for this use. I discovered after the fact when I tried the white lithium grease that these cutting boards actually have a little bit of a texture to them, and that texture was essentially creating a suction almost between the cutting board and the undersurface. And with this thick lithium grease on there, it was just kind of almost sticking to the surface. So took some of the friction out, but provided almost like a liquid bond. Tried some heavy duty silicone, a little bit too thin, just sort of absorbed into the surface. And same thing with the power lube. The thing that I found worked the best was just this cheap, here, I won't even show you what brand it is. Just this cheap jack oil, and this seems to be the right. It's not so thick where it creates kind of a suction force on those in those little voids in the cutting board, but it's not so thin where it just sort of washes off of there, kind of stays in place. So before we do our operations, what I would usually do is just like Guy Fieri on a hot pan, basically. And that is just nice and slippery. Somebody on Facebook suggested rock salt, and that's actually a really interesting idea. So I tried, I grabbed some of this stuff out of our water purification system, and these are like all different sizes. I think a lot of them are just too big. And they didn't work, but they worked well enough where I kind of got what they were going for. With rock salt, you're basically putting a zillion tiny little ball bearings on the surface, and you're creating a, sort of a, you're riding on top of all those tiny little sodium chloride ball bearings. So we're just going to put a little bit of fresh juice on all of our slip plates here. And then we'll lower the car down and show you guys what's up. By the way, while I'm doing this incredibly boring thing, let me tell you guys about the folks that make this show possible, namely our friends at CRC Industries. If you need, we've been fans of CRC stuff just as long, much longer than they've been advertising in the magazine or certainly supporting this show, because we like the stuff. It's good stuff. It works. Like, if you go to the store looking for brake cleaner, you just know to buy CRC brake clean. It's like the industry standard when it comes to cleaning your brakes. And really, around here, brake clean is kind of the thing. And they always send me emails, and they're like, can you please use our stuff properly? And I do as much as I can, but brake clean is really, really effective. It's sort of taking anything off of anything else. And I'm not above taking advantage of that. Does that make me a bad guy? I don't think it does. So look, what I'm getting at here is they support the show, so it would be, I would appreciate it if you would support them, or at least send them send them a Christmas card. Let them know you're thinking about them. I don't want to make you feel guilty, but you gotta call your grandma once in a while. So call grandma, man. Don't leave me hanging. And if you're we actually have some really cool stuff coming from them in a couple weeks that I'm really excited about. And I can't tell you about it yet, but it's going to be hitting retailers soon. And it's not revolutionary. It's just a new idea for packaging, something they already had that is going to make everybody really, really happy. And I'm really stoked about that. Also, check out our friends at Autobooks Aerobooks, autobooks-aerobooks.com. We got a cool Carol Smith book that we are putting up in the chat as we speak. Hey, pull the safety over on that side. Thanks, sir. Yeah, we have a cool Carol Smith chassis book that we're going to throw up in the chat there in a minute. Autobooks Aerobooks has been in Burbank for over half a century, and they are a good old-fashioned brick-and-mortar bookstore, but they are also a fantastic place to get books on the internet. Check them out at autobooks-aerobooks.com. Over 10,000 titles. This is all stuff from there. Here's a VW Rabbit shop manual. Here's a book on how to make your Subaru go faster. Classic shop. They got shop manuals from like Fords of the 30s and 40s there, and for modern stuff as well. So if it's history, if it's tech, if it's planes, trains, automobiles, motorcycles, boats, any of that stuff, autobooks-aerobooks.com. Check them out online. If you're ever in Southern California, they always have awesome stuff going on right there at the shop. Authors coming in and signing books, people hanging out, cruise-ins on the weekend. It's not only a cool place to get books, it is a hub of activity in Southern California for the automotive scene. All right, Ed, are we ready to lower the vehicle onto the pads? All right, I'm excited. So Chris, as we lower the car here, get a shot of the wheels, and they'll be able to see how these slip and turn plates look in action. Look at that, isn't that sexy? All right, so we're going to just barely take the weight off the car with the with the lift. The last thing we want is to basically have this thing slide off of our stands here and come crashing down onto the floor, which if you level it properly, it probably won't. That's part of the reason we built the little the little safety bars there, so yeah, it couldn't go much further. So here's what we have to do now. We've got to build a box around this car. Let me check to see if we have any questions. Andrew says, yes, brake clean is great for everything. Mark says he puts CRC brake fluid on his paint. No, don't do that. Actually, you can put CRC brake clean on your paint all you want, man, but you're not going to have much paint left after a while. Oh, Dinesh recommended vegetable oil for the slip plates. That would probably work too. Vegetable oil is actually about the same thickness as the jack oil we're using. That's a pretty good idea. Although I think the jack oil, dollar for dollar, was probably a better expenditure. Okay, so here's what we got to do next. We got to build a box around the car. Excuse me for a second. And we're going to use that box to measure our toe settings. So we have to build basically a perfectly square box, or at least a box with perfectly square sides. So how are we going to do that? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a couple of pieces of conduit. These pieces of conduit need to be obviously wider than the car. Then we've got to put one at the front, one at the back. We've got to run strings in between them. Those strings need to be equidistant apart. So the easiest way to do that is to cut a couple of notches in your conduit at the same distance apart. So both those notches are essentially the exact same distance apart. So when we run strings between those notches, we know those strings will always be parallel, because the other two legs of the box we're creating, even if that box is a trapezoid, we'll know that that box has parallel sides. So now we've got to suspend these pieces of conduit at the front and the back, and then run our strings. Our first idea was these, and these are just prototypes, obviously. It was just a couple of stands that we could take and run our conduit through. Put two at the front, two at the back, have our strings going between them, boom, you're done. Theoretically, it's a great idea. Here's why it's a bad idea, or here's why here's why what we're going to eventually show you is a better idea. First off, these are just flimsy as hell, which we knew they were going to be. You know, we were just doing this as a functionality test. These particular ones, just flimsy and crappy. The other problem is, to get these square to the car, you're constantly walking around the car and measuring and moving your strings 1/8 of an inch here, 1/16 of an inch here, and back and forth, and trying to get the front and the back just as tight and just as parallel. So when your strings are independent of your car, there's a lot more work that goes into it. So the answer is, let's mount these pieces of conduit right on the car somehow. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's a product out there that will allow you to do that. It's called the Smart Strings, from a company called Smart Racing. Fantastic product. They are actually advertisers in Grassroots Motorsports, although I don't even think they know they were going to get a shout out on the show tonight. We'll throw up a link. This is what we sort of tried to emulate with the setup that we built, because it's a great idea. They make a rig that essentially mounts on the car itself and allows you to mount your string bars at the front and at the back of the car. And it's a cool idea. It's $450, which is, for what you get, fairly reasonable. But we're trying to do it, as cheap as we possibly could. So here's what we came up with: a couple of simple frames we can hang off the front and the back of the car that we built out of aluminum, and these corner pieces from a company called 80/20. This is all stuff that I had sitting around. We use this stuff to build aviaries for our parrots with. We have a bunch of parrots. We build big aviaries with them. It's like an erector set. It's fantastic. You get these really trick little corner pieces, and you get this aluminum tube. You can stick together in any any way you want. It's very easy to work with. In fact, Chris, get a shot. There's one of our big aviaries over there that we built all out of this stuff. Oh my God, you guys, is the door open? Oh God, they're out. Everybody be very still. Their movement is based on vision. Okay, no, they're in the office. But they would kill us dead if they were out right now. Steven says he loves C5s. And Casey wants to know what year. Casey, this is a 2004 Z06 commemorative edition with the Z16 package, which means carbon fiber hood and the fancy stripes, and last year of production for the C5. It's a heck of a thing, 405 horsepower from a 5.7 liter LS V8. So these were the little frames we built out of the 8020 stuff. If you go, we'll throw up a link to 8020's main website. I think I sent David a link to their clearance site, which they do a lot. They have like this whole garage sale site on eBay, and that's where I get all this stuff. You can buy it. You can buy odd lots. You can buy blems and stuff, and it's a really, really good deal. If you were going to order this stuff and duplicate it, I don't think there's more than $100 worth of pieces here. Probably a lot less than that, actually, especially if you're buying stuff from their yard sale section. So these basically hang on the car, and I've actually made some little index marks with Sharpie in there, so I could repeat these alignments here. Chris, you don't need to come around to the back just yet. We'll do this, and I'm going to just hang this back here, and I'll set the front one up, and then we can set the back one up. All right, so now we have basically fixed points on the car that we can then take and set our bars on, and I've made index marks on all of these so I can repeat this. We're still going to measure and make sure it's all square, but that will certainly speed the process up. I think I need a clamp for this one. Okay, so now we've got our bars up. We can get our string ready, and because we have our bars notched, our string is going to basically fall to the exact right place because it is indexed by these handy notches. Oh, that's going to be bad. I got my string under my cup of salt over there. Oh, God. Damn it. Hey, Ed, you and your young eyes, come untie this. You do that side. I'll straighten this side out. I know. I tried not to pull it too tight. It almost pulled. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Jesus. It's all going to hell now. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. I'm going to be tied here for the rest of the evening. That was like some serious Cirque du Soleil shit right there, wasn't it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ed. Okay, where were we? Oh, yes. So we're putting our strings into the notches in our bars. If there's anything I'm proud of here, it's the whole notches in the bars thing. That just made a nice, easy way to index the whole thing. We're using 3/4 inch EMT conduit. They're about $8 a piece for a 10-foot section. So total investment on this thing is probably, as it sits, you know, a couple of $220. Just, you know, good dimensional lumber is an investment. You know, the cheapest thing in the world. The nice thing, probably uses a lot of pieces it have sitting around already, and you might not have to, you know, like we had a lot of the aluminum sitting around already, so we didn't have to go buy everything. So we saved a few bucks there. But if you were going to go actually buy everything, you're looking at well under $300, probably somewhere around 2 1/4, you know, depending on how aggressive your local Lowe's is. Okay, so now we have this perfectly square box built on the outside of the car. Yeah, David says the hardest part is taking the knots out of the string. Those were stunt knots. Those were all done with CGI. So it's cool. So now we're going to confirm that our measurements are all square. With this car, we can easily measure from these nice flat. Let me start from this side here. Measure from these nice flat center caps. So we got about 5 3/32 on this side. And perfect 5 3/32 on that side. So looks like our index marks actually worked here. 5 1/4, 5 1/8. Our rear scooched just a little bit, but okay, we're square enough for government work there. So we have a nice square box built around our car. We use these frames. It's nice and repeatable. It's portable. You know, you can probably load these up, take them to the track. You don't. I love the 80/20 stuff, conduit, and not nice, soft, smooth aluminum. You're probably going to want to use more paint protection than we're using. You know, if this wasn't clean, perfectly clean paint, I'm sure everybody's freaking out there right now. I would probably put some rags down if this was, you know, a brand new GT3 Porsche. But this thing will hit more cones this weekend than it will, you know, than any damage that'll be done tonight. So now we can look at measuring our toe. For the Corvette, that is simple. We're going to measure the distance between our string and our wheel rim at the back of the wheel. 3 5/8 inches. And at the front, 3 5/8 inches. So we have 0 toe on this side, which is what we were actually going for. Full disclosure, I messed around with this the other night a little bit and kind of changed and set my toe where I wanted it. But that's basically what you're doing. You're measuring the distance between the front of your wheel rim and your known, you know, set distance string that you know is parallel to the car now. And you're measuring the back of the wheel and comparing those two distances. So if the front of the wheel was 1/8 of an inch closer to the string than the rear of the wheel, we would have, anybody? We would have 1/8 of an inch of toe out on that side. Don't forget, we're not talking about total toe here, talking about individual wheel toe. So if we have 1/8 of an inch of toe on one side and 1/8 of an inch of toe on the other side, we've got 1/4 inch of total toe. But that's how you we'll measure your toe on both sides. Let's see if we've got any questions. Nothing major going on online. Where are we at on time, by the way? Oh, we're perfect. We got about 10 minutes left, and we got about 10 minutes left before 10 o'clock. So now we're going to show you. So that's toe basically. You do that. Front wheels, back wheels. Go under there. If you're going to change these toe settings, I would go under before. Loosen all of your tie rods. Have the wrenches ready, where you can just boop, pop under there. Move those tie rods a little bit. Come back out and measure, and then go right back under. And of course, start with your steering wheel straight ahead. That way you can set your toe with a straight steering wheel, and it's just nicer to have a straight steering wheel. So let's talk about camber and Castor a little bit. A camber gauge is going to be the only thing tonight that I am going to tell you to just go out and buy one. Because a good camber gauge is not only a necessity if you're going to do any kind of track work, any kind of autocross work, it's also a little tricky to properly improvise. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. You can go to Harbor Freight or go to Amazon and buy one of these cheap little angle gauges, and these are magnetic. You can magnetize it to a piece of steel, and you can accomplish the same thing with one of these. It's almost not like there's just some stuff that it's easier to have the actual right tool that somebody designed. And a good camber gauge is not, it's an investment, but it's an investment that you're going to actually use. The one that I have is also from Smart Racing Products. This is a smart camber gauge. We'll throw up a link to these guys. It's under a couple $100, I think, and it's really something that you should have. I mean, look, you can't restore your entire car with a Phillips head screwdriver. You're going to have to get the right tools for the right thing once in a while. And a camber gauge is one of those things that I definitely suggest getting the right tool for the job. So what are we looking at when we're measuring camber? We're going to basically measure, as we said before, that tilt of the wheels, and that's also how we're going to measure our Castor as well, by measuring the change in the camber and applying a multiplication factor to that changing camber over a certain range of motion. We'll show you that in a minute. Using a good camber gauge is basically as easy as sticking it up to the side of your wheels. We can see that we have about 2.5 degrees of negative camber over here. I actually like a little bit more. I'd actually like closer to about 3 degrees. But that's probably good enough for this weekend. And we could talk about proper settings all night long. Really, the best way to find proper camber settings is with well, if you talk to Andy Hollis, the best way to find proper camber settings is with a skid pad and a stopwatch or timing system. You can also get fairly close using a pyrometer, measuring temperature across those tires. You want that temperature to be fairly even across those tires as once you get heat in those tires and have a combination of right-hand and left-hand corners. You want the heating across those tires to be fairly even, and you can use your pyrometer to sort of get started towards your ultimate setting, and then you can use your use a skid pad to eventually get to your final setting. There was wasn't that in the magazine at one point? Yeah. Do you remember when?
It's online too.
Oh, it is? Okay, yeah. We'll actually throw up a link if we can find it before the end of the show to the story that Andy Hollis wrote for us on finding your ideal camber measurement. Yeah, actually, George says he uses an app for a level on his phone. We have one of those too. They work really good. Usually it's under in my iPhone. I think it's under my compass somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So your phone will frequently have an app like this in it that actually measures in a couple of different directions. And if you're going to use your phone for something like that, the trickiest thing about using your phone for something like that is getting it perfectly square with the surface. A lot of times, if you have a case on your phone, it's going to have bumps and undulations, or it's got buttons on one side or the other. So figure out a way to get your phone square with the surface before you try and do something like that. Actually, I use my phone all the time for putting decals on the car, get them all at the same angle and same level. Okay, so here's how we're going to go about finding our Castor setting. So your Castor setting is going to be essentially, we're going to measure the change in camber through a range of motion of the wheel. In our case, we're going to turn the wheel 180 degrees one way, measure camber, turn 180 degrees the other way, measure camber there, then apply a correction factor. And I'll show you what the correction factor is for various angles in a minute. But let's go through the motions here before we actually do it. And this is where our slip and turn plates come in real handy. So as we turn these babies, we can actually see our turn plates doing their job here. Okay, so we're going to turn our wheel 180 degrees to the left. And we'll measure our camber in this position. So that is basically 1 degree of negative camber. So turn to the left, 1 degree negative camber. Now we're going to go back, we're going to turn the wheel 180 degrees to the right. Now for your car, it might not be 180 degrees. I'll show you how to figure out what it is for your car in a minute. But for a Corvette with a 16-to-1 steering rack, some dude way smarter than me has figured out, basically how this works. Okay, so 180 degrees to the right, we have 3.6 degrees. Of negative camber. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the difference, the delta, in these two numbers. So 3.6 difference between negative 1 and negative 3.6 degrees. That's pretty easy. It's negative 2.6 degrees. Your positives and negatives actually don't matter for your final number. So the difference is just 2.6 degrees. Now we're going to take that and multiply it by, for our Corvette here, for our C5 Corvette, I think the number is also the same for C6 Corvettes. Don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly sure. I'm going to multiply this by 2.62. So Ed, you're David. One of you guys do that for me quick? 2.6 times our correction factor of 2.62 equals 6.812 degrees of Castor. That is the inclination, if we could actually see the theoretical line drawn between, in the case of our Corvette with dual upper and lower A-arms, if we could see the theoretical line drawn between the upper ball joint and the lower ball joint, we'd see that that line was at an angle of 6.812 degrees. Now, that is how you do it for a Corvette. For any other car, you can set the wheels to a known angle. You can turn them 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 20 degrees, and apply a similar correction factor. If you are going to turn your wheels, so we've got a 10-degree rotation, a 15-degree rotation, or a 20-degree rotation. And what you want to do is you want to apply a correction factor based on doing that. So you can use different methods to determine exactly what how you're turning the wheel. We have like a woodworker's angle gauge like this. This is actually set at 15 degrees right now. So we could hold this up to our string here and get a parallel reading. We can see that we're actually a little bit less than 15 degrees, which kind of works out for what we did our correction factor at. But you can cut a indexing block out of cardboard or out of coroplast or something to get your 15-degree angle, and you basically measure 15 degrees one way, 15 degrees the other. Then you apply a correction factor. Let me double check. I have a lot of numbers in my head. Let me walk in here for a second and make sure what my correction factor is, because Lord knows I'll screw it up somehow. And hopefully our mic reaches all the way in here. Probably should have written this down before the show, but I didn't. Okay, that's what I thought it was. I just didn't want to quote you guys something wrong. Oh, before I started giving you numbers. Okay, so if you turn your wheels 10 degrees, 10 degrees, you take delta camber times 3. 15 degrees, you're going to take delta camber times 2. 20 degrees, you're going to take delta camber times 1.5. So that is going to give you your relative Castor reading for that wheel. What's the ideal Castor reading? That's a trickier situation. That's going to basically depend on your car. There's probably a great knowledge base out there for your car already. See what your friends are using, and see if somebody's beating you, ask them what they're doing, and then do that exact same thing and see how it feels. What I like to do, this is just me, I like to start from a known quantity. For example, so right now I've got all my toe set to 0. I have 0 toe in the front, I have 0 toe in the back. I know where that setting is. I'm going to do some testing on that setting. I'm going to adjust from there. I'll try a little bit of toe in the front, I'll try a little bit of toe out in the front. I'll see what the car does in different situations. I'll see where it's objectively faster and where it subjectively feels better. I'll get used to how it drives in each situation, and then I'll use like a coyote killing something outside here, or maybe werewolves. I don't know. And I'll use that to come up with my ultimate, sort of setting. Probably I'm going to end up pretty close to straight ahead, both in the front and the back. I might end up scooching the rears in just a tiny bit for a little more stability, and scooching the front out just a tiny bit for a little more crisp turn in when it comes to toe. For Castor, we can put some shims in there and probably get up to about 7.5 degrees of Castor in the front. Might be too much. We might actually get too much camber change as we go through. The best way to find out, folks, is testing. Testing and hands-on experience. You can see what other competitors are doing. You can see what the internet knowledge base says is a great place to start. But your best results may not come at the exact same spot that someone else's best results come at. So keep that in mind while you are doing this work. So Ed wants to know, where does he find that correction factor? And somebody got our 6.81 before we did. We'll post these correction. David, just type these in while we're waiting, or we'll throw them up on the website. But for now, just screenshot here. Chris, get a nice close up of that. And here, Ed, screenshot that right, or Ed Knapp, not that Ed right there. Screenshot that right now, and that is your Castor corrections. So Dinesh says Castor settings are easy for him. He's only got 4 different preset Castor settings for the front. Yeah, some cars are going to have, you know, even if you have like a set of high performance Castor plates, Camber Castor plates, you might have just sort of, they might not slide. They might just sort of go to different positions, and you've got those to choose from. And that does take some of the guesswork out of it. You know, you can try one, try the other, try the other, try the other, and you're done. And whichever one is faster is the one you stick with. But yeah, really the only real way to find this stuff is testing. And it's, like I say, it's nice to start with what the fast guys are doing and work from there till you find your personal preference and your personal sweet spot. Folks, that is pretty much the show tonight. Thanks for joining us. I hope you learned something. We're going to throw up, before we go, we're going to throw up a couple of links for you. One of the links we're going to throw up is tonight, February 28th, until midnight Eastern time. So you guys got a couple hours left. Last day of our deal of the month for Grassroots Motorsports cool stuff for February. So what is the deal of the month? Hey, I'm glad you asked. For 20 bucks, actually $19.99, you will get a 1-year subscription to Grassroots Motorsports magazine and a t-shirt, a free Grassroots Motorsports t-shirt. We'll just throw it right on there for you. 20 bucks. That is a deal that we usually only give away point of purchase. Like, well, that's a deal we usually run as a special for events that we're doing. That's usually the only time you can get that. But for February, we decided, since that's, you know, it's my birthday, we're gonna throw it in there. So 20 bucks, you get a free t-shirt with your sub. Good if you're gonna buy a new sub or if you're going to renew an existing sub. And also, I think we got a good deal on our long sleeve t-shirts up there right now. They're only like $21 or something. So if you're running a track event, gotta have a long sleeve cotton shirt. They're a great choice. And you can also go to our deal of the month page, which I think the link is already up there. You can get a free copy of our Trackside Companion, which is our guide to a lot of cool stuff that you need to know before you go to a track day or an autocross. It's full of great checklists and log sheets and sort of great ways to track your performance and to increase your performance, and great ways to get more fun and more speed out of your track time, and to have a good time while you're doing it, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out of things. It's a cool little book. It's very, very handy. Also, check out our friends at CRC Industries, folks. CRC has over 15,000 individual part numbers of automotive chemicals, household chemicals, lubricants, cleaners, brake clean, carb cleaner. Whereas, like, you can't swing a dead cat in here without hitting something from CRC, like this scroungy old can of brake clean. It's almost empty. I got more brake clean on the way, but these thumb prints, these greasy paw prints on this thing, this is not set decoration. This is not Hollywood magic here. This is legitimate dirt put on here by legitimately me during legitimate work, because we like this stuff a lot. If you're at a big box store, if you're at Walmart, if you're at Lowe's or Home Depot, if you're at an auto parts store like O'Reilly or Advanced Auto Parts or Napa, and you're reaching for automotive chemicals and you're grabbing that CRC stuff, not only are you getting a fantastic product, you are getting a product from a company that supports the stuff you love. Like this show. I hope you love this show. Even if you just like this show, they are supporting the world that we exist in, folks, and we would appreciate it if you would use that opportunity to give back to the community by helping out the folks that help out the community directly with their support. Also, check out our friends at Autobooks Aerobooks. You can see them at autobooks-aerobooks.com, and they are the finest bookstore anywhere in the world for your automotive, aeromotive, motorcycle-emotive, boat-emotive, train-emotive, dirigible-emotive book or magazine needs. Tens of thousands of books, magazines, DVDs on the shelf there, tech manuals and photography books and history pieces about racing and personalities in the car world. And David's put his hostage bag over his head again because I'm rambling about stuff. But check them out at autobooks-aerobooks.com. If you're ever out in Burbank, check them out in person, and they would appreciate you stopping by and saying hi. And even if you just want to send them an email on the website and say you appreciate them supporting the show, we would appreciate that because we love you and you love us and we love them too. Next week, so here's what's going on. This week I am headed down to Fort Myers for the first SCCA match tour of the year. Going to be running in A Street against a very, very tough field, but I am going to be going down there with our new Leroy engineering trailer behind the car. Chris, walk with me here. Here's a little preview of next week's show. Here is our Leroy engineering tire trailer. It is a bespoke tire trailer created for the autocross and track community. It is an impeccably constructed and engineered piece of equipment. This weekend is going to be its maiden voyage down to Fort Myers. I am immeasurably excited to haul down there with it. Sorry, we didn't have it lit very well. But next week is going to be sort of the recap of that. We'll be taking a close look at that, talking to the guys from Leroy Engineering, and I have it on good authority. If you are interested in purchasing one of those amazing little tire trailers, they may even provide some discount codes for us next week. So if you're in the market for a track trailer, next week would be a great time to tune in because we may have some discount codes available from the guys at Leroy Engineering, and they can build you one of those yourself. It has double A-arm suspension and adjustable coilovers. It is amazing, and everybody's it's expensive. Dude, I have spent so much money and so much time and so much frustration fixing crappy little kit trailers, from Sam's Club and Tractor Supply. I've gone through so many of those things and been stranded so many times at the side of the road. The upgrade is worth it for me to not have to worry about is my trailer going to make it to this next event, or how many spares do I have to carry for my trailer. So that's my pitch. That's just where I'm coming from on that. Let's see if we have. One last thing. Yes, I see our friend Andrew Mafasanti is watching. If you want to build your own setup stands, Andrew, smart guy in his own right. I'm actually probably going to do some of these. He has plans for a very cool set of steel setup stands that he will send you for free. He's got a PayPal link on his page. You can throw him a couple of bucks if you're not a complete D-bag. But he's got complete shopping list, cut list, welded together plans for a very cool set of home-built setup stands that he will happily share with the rest of the motorsports community. We'll throw the link up to those now. So yeah, Andrew, thanks for turning us on to that, and they are really, really well designed, and I'm probably going to build a set myself here, make a trip back to Metal Supermarket and pick up some steel for those things. So yes, thanks for the shout out for my red line there, Brian. I appreciate that. So Ed says we need to have new string in the budget. Andrew threw his stuff up there already. Yeah, there's his stuff. He sent us a set of those plans, and I was looking over them, and they are wicked cool. And they're actually, the way he presents the plans to you, if you want to make some modifications to them, it's pretty easy to kind of make your own little modifications and kind of customize them to your needs. So I think I got a set of those in my future. Whip out the welder and get to work on those. Folks, that is it. Hope you had a good time tonight. Thank you very much for all the likes and all the shares. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and get one last look, see if we missed any questions. Thank you for all of the... Brian was all excited about the 80/20 clearance sight. I love the 80/20 clearance sight, brother. It is very, very cool. Cool. It looks like we are fairly caught up there. So yeah, thanks for all the likes. Thank you especially for all the shares. If you joined us tonight on YouTube, thank you very much for being over on that side. Hopefully you will subscribe to our feed on YouTube. You'll be the first to know about new stuff we post on YouTube. The live show goes up there every single week, an hour or so after it's over. It's archived up there, plus whatever we can find to throw on the YouTube page. Stuff's going up there all the time. I will probably be live a couple times this weekend from the Fort Myers match tour. Try and give you guys some live in-car looks at some of the runs that I take down there. And then of course we'll have info and video from our Solo Storm from Petrol Data data system that will go up probably the Monday after that event. But I'll be going live from down there, hanging out with you guys, showing you some of the cool cars that are down there, showing you some in-car and just kind of hanging out and chatting. So if you're on this weekend, certainly come hang out and tell all your friends. And that is it. Once again, thanks to Ed and David and Chris behind the camera here tonight. Everybody's pitching in, doing a great job. And luckily, Ed did not need to do too much stuff except untangle me from the bad evil string. So thanks very much for that. Folks, that is it for tonight. I am JG Pasterjack. This is Grassroots Motorsports Live, presented by CRC Industries. You are very, very kind and very, very generous for hanging out with us on your Wednesday night. We'll see you again next week. Good night, everybody.